The sun hung low over the plains, a dull orange coin melting into the horizon, turning the dry earth to fire. The heat had baked everything to silence. No cattle lowed, no wind stirred the grass. Not even the cicadas dared to sing. It was the kind of stillness that came before something changed forever. A dark figure appeared on the road, a man on horseback, tall and motionless against the dying light. His horse, a black stallion dusted gray from the long ride, moved with slow, steady power, each hoofbeat sending little clouds of dirt swirling behind. His name was Duke Maddox, a man known across the frontier for two things: his word and his ruthlessness when that word was broken. He wasn't a villain, not in his eyes. He simply took what was owed. But today, for reasons he didn't understand, his chest felt heavier than usual. The letter in his saddlebag rustled with each gust, a paper promise that told him this was business. Yet his gut told him it was something else. The McCrae ranch came into view like an old wound that refused to heal. The fences leaned with age, the barn's paint was long gone, and the once green fields lay brown and brittle under the summer sun. Even from a distance, Duke could tell the place was dying. It had been years since the McCraes could afford to keep real cattle. Only a few skinny cows wandered near the far fence, ribs showing beneath dull hides. He rode closer, the leather of his saddle creaking softly. As he neared the porch, the screen door opened with a groan that seemed to echo the weariness of the place. An old man stepped out, thin as a rail, shoulders bowed, his hands trembling as he gripped the porch post. His hair was white, and his face, lined deep from years of sun and worry, still carried the pride of someone who had once been strong. His name was Thomas McCrae, but Duke's eyes didn't stay on him for long. Behind the old man, in the shadow of the doorway, stood a young woman. Her dress was plain, faded blue cotton patched at the seams, her hair tied back in a loose braid that had escaped in wisps around her face. She looked tired, bone-tired, but her eyes were bright, wary, and alive. Duke felt them before he met them, as though she were measuring him already. She stepped forward, pushing the door open with a soft creak. "You must be the man they sent," she said, voice steady though he could hear the fear beneath it. "Come to take what little we've got left?" Her words hit harder than he expected. Duke dismounted, the ground crunching beneath his boots. He untied the letter from his saddlebag and held it out. "Not sent," he said evenly. "I bought your debt." The sheriff signed over the papers. "The land's mine now." Her father's breath rattled as he took a stumbling step forward. "Please," he wheezed, his voice raw. "I begged the bank for more time. The drought ruined us. We couldn't—" "Time's up," Duke interrupted, his tone flat but not cruel. "The law's the law, Mr. McCrae." The old man's eyes filled with tears, his shoulders shaking. He muttered something under his breath, maybe a prayer, maybe a curse. Clara, the girl, moved quickly to his side, steadying him with her small hands. Duke noticed how gently she did it, like someone who'd spent her whole life keeping broken things together. "You'll take our home?" she asked, looking up at him. "Even knowing what it means?" "I'll give you till sundown," he said after a pause. "Pack what you can. Then you'll need to leave the property." Her mouth fell open slightly, as if she wanted to say something sharp, but her father's coughing fit stopped her. She guided him to a chair on the porch, murmuring softly to calm him. Duke looked away, uncomfortable in a way he hadn't been for years. He'd been through this before, families losing their land, men begging for mercy that never came. But something about this girl's voice, that quiet mix of pride and desperation, lingered in his chest, like the echo of a church bell long after the sound had faded. "I worked that field since I was little," her father rasped. "Buried my wife under that oak by the fence. You'll take even her ground too?" Duke hesitated. He'd seen men cry before, usually when the whiskey ran out or the law came knocking. But this was different. There was something sacred in that plea, something that clawed at his sense of right and wrong. "Mr. McCrae," he said finally, "you should have sold before it came to this. I didn't want it to end like this either." The old man laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "Ain't that always what they say before they take what ain't theirs?" Clara shot Duke a look that could have cut through steel. Her voice was low but fierce. "We don't need your pity, Mr. Maddox. We'll go. But don't pretend you're doing us a favor." He met her gaze and held it. "I'm not pretending anything." For a moment, neither of them moved. The heat hummed between them, dry and tense, as if the world held its breath. Then Duke turned and walked back to his horse. He mounted, but didn't ride away. Not yet. Instead, he stopped at the edge of the yard, watching the woman and her father sitting in the fading light. The man's head bowed, his hands shaking as Clara pressed a cloth to his lips, murmuring something he couldn't hear. Something inside Duke twisted. He didn't like seeing mercy in people who'd been wronged. It reminded him too much of the faces he'd left behind. His own father, beaten down by debts that had driven him to the bottle. Duke had sworn he'd never be weak like that. He'd learned to take before someone took from him. But tonight, watching that girl trying to comfort a dying man, he wondered if he'd gone too far. The sun sank below the hills, and the first stars began to appear. He lit a small fire near the barn and set up camp, figuring he'd wait till morning to take possession. Maybe give them the night. That was more kindness than most men got from him. Hours later, the house was quiet. He was sharpening his knife, lost in thought, when the faint crunch of footsteps reached his ears. He looked up. Clara was walking toward him, her dress catching the flicker of firelight, her face pale but determined. He stood as she approached. "You shouldn't be out here," he said softly. Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed fixed on his. "You're taking everything from us, but maybe you don't have to." "What are you saying?" She swallowed hard, the firelight glinting off the tears she refused to let fall. "If it's land you want, take me instead." The words hung in the air, quiet and devastating. Duke froze, knife still in hand, the edge catching the light. "What did you say?" he whispered, her lips parted, trembling. "Just spare him, please. Just spare my father." And there in the dying glow of the fire, her voice broke completely. The night went still again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was alive with the sound of a heart offering itself up to save another. Duke didn't move. The flames crackled softly between them, throwing their shadows long across the dirt, two figures caught in the moment before mercy or damnation. Duke Maddox had seen every shade of desperation, but nothing like this. Nothing like the girl standing before him in the half-light, trembling but unbroken, her voice barely holding together as she offered herself to save her father. The fire cracked between them, and the sound of it seemed too loud in the quiet. He could see the rise and fall of her chest, the flicker of resolve and shame battling across her face. He set his knife down slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "You don't mean that," he said, though his voice came out softer than he intended. Clara's chin lifted, defiance glinting through the tears. "I do. You came here for land, for payment. We've got nothing left to give. So if it means my father can keep his home, then take me instead." The way she said it, honest, almost pleading, made something inside him ache. He'd expected anger, maybe a fight, but not this. She was too young to sound so resigned, too proud to be begging. It twisted at the part of him he thought was long gone, buried under years of dust and deal-making. "Clara," he murmured, shaking his head. "You don't know what you're offering." Her voice steadied even as her hands trembled. "I know exactly what I'm offering. I know what men like you do when they take something. You don't just take the land, you take the heart of what's left. So if it's me you want, then I'll go. But leave him be." He swallowed hard, looking away because her eyes felt too much like judgment. The stars had come out now, scattered like silver dust across the sky. The world was still except for the crackle of the fire and the far-off cry of a night bird. "I'm not a monster," he said finally. Her breath hitched. "Then prove it." The words cut straight through him. He could have laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. He'd spent years building a name on being the man who didn't bend, who never took pity. But here was this girl, barefoot in the dirt, daring him to be something else. He rubbed a hand over his face, weary all of a sudden. "Your father's debt isn't small, Clara. You can't pay it back with words or pride." "I don't have either left to give," she whispered. "All I have is myself." He turned to her again, and this time he really looked. Not at the worn dress, or the smudge of dirt on her cheek, but at her, the way she stood tall despite the shaking, the way her voice quivered but didn't break. There was fire in her still, a quiet kind that didn't fade with fear. "Sit down," he said after a long silence. "Please." She hesitated, then sank slowly onto a log across from him. The firelight danced between them, painting her face in gold and shadow. Her eyes met his, wide and uncertain, but there was a strength in them that he hadn't seen in anyone for years. "When I was your age," he began, his voice low, "I watched men lose everything. My father was one of them. He begged the man who held our debt to spare us. That man didn't. He took it all, the land, the livestock, even the house, left us with dust and shame." Clara listened, her brow furrowed. "So now you're doing the same?" The question stung because it was true. He'd become what he'd hated, a man who took without looking twice. He stared into the fire, the orange glow reflecting in his eyes like guilt. "I told myself it was different," he said, "that I was just keeping what others couldn't hold. But I see your father, and I see what I swore I'd never be again." She said nothing, just watched him quietly. The night air was cool now, the scent of dust and dry grass filling the space between them. After a moment, she whispered, "Then don't be him." He looked up. Her words were soft, but they landed with the weight of truth. "What if I let you stay?" he asked carefully. "What if I gave you the land, your father's house, everything? What then?" She blinked, not understanding. "Why would you do that?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Because you remind me that mercy isn't weakness." "Maybe I've been wrong about that." Her lips parted slightly, unsure if he was mocking her. But there was no cruelty in his face now, just exhaustion and something close to regret. "You mean, you'd let him keep it?" He nodded slowly. "Your father keeps his home, but I won't pretend there's no debt. You still owe me something." She swallowed hard, the fear flickering back. "Then what do you want from me?" His eyes softened. "Not what you think." She frowned, confused. "I want you to come work for me," he said, "at my ranch. I could use someone who knows the land, someone who doesn't break easy. You'll have a place to stay, fair wages, no tricks. If you decide to leave, you leave. But the debt dies with me." For a long time, she didn't move. The fire popped, and an ember floated up into the dark. Finally, she whispered, "You'd do that." "For us?" He nodded. "For you." Something in her expression softened, like a thread pulled loose from years of fear. "You don't even know me." "Maybe not," he said quietly, "but I know what you just tried to do. You'd give up your life to save your father. That's more honesty than most people ever show me." Her eyes filled with tears, though she blinked them away quickly. "He's all I have left," she murmured. Duke rose to his feet, brushing dust from his coat. "Then I'll make sure you keep him." He offered his hand. "Do we have a deal?" She stared at it for a moment before taking it. Her fingers were small against his rough palm, trembling slightly. The moment their hands met, something shifted, something he couldn't quite name, but it settled deep in his chest. "Thank you," she said softly, looking down. He tipped his hat, his voice rough. "Get some rest, Miss McCrae. We ride at dawn." When she turned to leave, her bare feet whispering against the dry earth, he watched her disappear into the dim light spilling from the house. A single lantern glowed in the window, casting her shadow across the porch. For the first time in a long time, Duke felt that he'd done something right. He sat back down by the fire, staring into the flames as the night deepened around him. He thought of his father, of all the debts that had scarred his soul, and wondered if maybe this was his first payment toward peace. Inside the house, Clara slipped into her father's room. He was asleep, breathing slow and shallow. She brushed a hand over his forehead, whispering that everything was going to be okay now, though she wasn't sure she believed it yet. But as she looked out the window and saw Duke's campfire burning steady against the darkness, she felt something she hadn't felt in months: safety. Not from money or miracles, but from a man who had chosen mercy over power. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. When dawn broke, the light fell soft and golden over the ranch. The birds began to sing again, timid at first, as though testing the air after a storm. Duke packed his things, mounted his horse, and looked toward the house. Clara stood on the porch, her shawl wrapped tight, her eyes meeting his. Neither spoke. But as he tipped his hat, she nodded, a silent promise that the past would not define what came next. And as they rode away together toward the rising sun, the land behind them, for the first time in a long while, seemed to breathe again,